So, hi everyone. I'm Tracy and my husband Aaron, and we're going to start our series on relationships or spouse for the WTF podcast. And we're just going to talk a little bit about us and who we are, how we got to be here in this crazy life. So we've been married, 20 years?
20 years.
This last August. And we've got dogs now. Trying to break out. So we met kind of what would be considered unorthodox at the time, 20 years ago, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It was on the internet.
Yep.
And it was at a time where if you met somebody on the internet, they were going to be a serial killer, and
long before any of the dating sites that are out there now.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I remember my family thinking that I was going to get murdered in the backseat of some car if I went out with somebody. And you asked me out. What did I say? Do you remember?
No.
You don't remember that far back?
No.
I told you that we could go out, but I didn't really want to have anything serious. Do you remember our first date?
We went to Mode's Bum Steer.
Do you remember what happened?
Not really.
I complained the whole time about men.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was that.
That was one of my favorite things I mean, not because I liked complaining about men, but that it's one of my favorite stories that you stuck around after that. Glutton for punishment, maybe.
Definitely.
So I think, though, we did talk a lot during that time, but it was back when landlines, because that's what you used. We didn't have cell phones.
Well, and that was the beauty of the internet back then too. I mean, we used IRC. If anybody out there is that old,
or even knows about that.
There was video chat really wasn't a thing. So we started talking by typing back and forth on a computer for hours and hours on end.
Yeah, because it was long distance was still a thing, and it was expensive to talk on the phone. We did, but not as much. We also met in person at parties that were arranged by the group, and that's how we got to know each other a little bit more. So what were the qualities that you liked about me at the time?
Well, I mean, obviously when I first met you, even though you don't remember it, I was physically attracted to you.
Mm-hmm.
You were definitely the best looking girl in the room.
Aw.
On that occasion, for sure.
Just on that occasion?
No, on most occasions.
Yeah.
But when it came right down to it, it was the fact that we actually could have a conversation for quite a while. I mean, we were both pretty well rounded, and we could talk about pretty much anything. So
yeah, and I think one of the things that I liked about you is you listened. I talk a lot, but I also appreciated that you actually heard what I was saying, and that I could tell you were listening, and and taking what I had to say seriously most of the time. And then so yeah, we got married. We decided to get married and make a crazy family. I had 3 kids that you instantly became stepdad to, and then we ended up having number 4.
Yep, 16 years ago.
Yeah, He's 16. So, and we have 2 grandkids now. Yay.
On the other coast, unfortunately.
On the other coast. I know it's too far away. But because we have a 16-year-old, I know we've been talking about this a couple of times that what are we going to do when we're alone? Empty nesters, I guess. We talk about that quite often now. We're at that stage of our lives. And we have been having great conversations about not being at all, what's the word, having the same interests and stuff, trying to figure out what we're going to do together, what we're going to do separately. And
yeah, finding common ground is definitely going to continue to be a challenge. I mean, you know, we've changed over the years, so you know, things we don't have the same interests that we used to, and so we're definitely working through that, trying to figure all that out. So
that's going to be, I think, and that's I think one of our big challenges, aside from hormonal changes and stuff that we're going to get into here in a second, but just trying to navigate, like, we kind of are starting to come up above water after the mass of kids. We just kind of jumped in and didn't really have that time alone before.
Yeah.
So
we'll probably kill each other, but never know.
It's possible. Anything's possible. Part of one of the things that we did since we've been talking about, you know, interests and everything, we did our personality types and found out that we're almost complete opposites.
Yeah, we knew that going
in. And you're pretty classic INTJ, so you're very much an introvert, very much a linear thinker, my left brain, Capricorn, like to the T, and I am the opposite. I'm an ENFP. The only thing we're the same in is the N, which is probably good. I don't know. And so I'm the opposite. I'm introvert, extrovert, and like almost to the T, Gemini. So makes a very interesting way of being in a relationship, I think, because we both, I think, see things very differently and interpret differently. And I think that's where we get into some of our challenging conversations, because we don't process it the same way even. And so when you think it's one thing, I'm thinking it's completely opposite. And then we're like looking at each other like, what the hell? It's been an interesting ride. But so that's all of that to really kind of give a background on kind of where we're coming from as we walk into this experiment of a podcast, which is really fun because I really appreciate the fact that you were willing to do this. And I mentioned it at least one time in some of the earlier episodes about why I had this idea, which was because I had seen so many people having challenges with their spouse or significant other. And I was just surprised that even though we are having our problems, I don't understand how, and I just felt really bad on how some other people are having relationship issues. And I just thought maybe even though we're not necessarily the model.
Well, I mean, nobody's perfect for sure, but
yeah, but I think we try hard. Most of the time. Sometimes we, you know, we're human, but I do think we are in this forever, however long that may be, and we're trying. And I think that that's something. And I think that having that as a background is a really good foundation to start, and then just kind of talk about what we're doing, and maybe hopefully it'll help someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm 48. I've mentioned that before. You're
46.
46. I have to think about it depending on what time of the year. You're almost 47.
Yep.
Getting close. So I wrapped the cradle. And obviously I'm going through perimenopause. There's just no doubt about it at this point. We didn't really know exactly that was happening for a while. How would you describe like when some of these changes started happening, like my mood swings and the stuff that we had going on where I remember we had a lot of conversations where you would say, what is going on? And I would say, I don't know what you're talking about. So how would you describe like what was happening and when you started seeing some of it, if you can remember?
Oh man. I don't know. We started getting into a lot more arguments all of a sudden. I mean, we were doing really well for quite a while, and then for some reason we just started fighting over stupid stuff. The weird hunger thing after work was like a clue, I guess. It was really frustrating for me because, you know, I cook most of the meals, and you know, it's like a teenager coming home from school and having second lunch 2 hours before dinner. You know, when you came home and started stuffing your face, I'm trying to make dinner and you're upset that there's no food. That was the biggest clue, I think. And I don't know, a lot of started becoming more irrational, which is tough.
Be careful.
No, but seriously, I mean, there were definitely some, I don't really want to say personality changes, but kind of personality changes that were unexplained. And, you know, I started thinking all kinds of weird things. But
like what?
Well, you know, I mean,
well,
I thought you were having an affair for a long time.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Because you were just being weird. You know, you'd be away doing things and not.
In grad school?
Yeah.
Because I was in grad school
part,
during that time.
Yeah. I mean, and that was tough too. So, yeah, I mean, there were just a lot of unexplained changes. And, you know, we were both really busy in the last couple of years, and, you know, we didn't have a chance to talk a lot about those things. So, so I think it took us a little longer to actually figure out what was going on. But yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Well, I definitely remember the hangry part. And I remember when we would be at restaurants, because there were times where it was not possible for me to wait in my mind.
Well, I remember,
you know,
when you were in tears because you didn't get your vegetables.
I was so
hungry.
Have
the dip.
I was so hungry, but they didn't bring it, and I was so hungry, and you guys got to eat before me, and
so upset. I mean, more upset than you should have been.
Oh, for sure.
And that,
looking back on it,
yeah,
for sure. And I remember you being like,
and I was upset. I was like, what the hell is wrong with you? But anyway.
And and you said something along those lines. I mean, I think you were nicer about it, but you were like, it's not that big of a deal. And I was really, really upset. And you told me that it was like really, you were very confused, was what I can remember. Is you were just like, I don't understand why you're getting so upset about this. The hangry was really a big thing for me, for sure. And, and I think you're right. It really, we had, beginning of our relationship, we had a lot of arguments that were very eventful. But then after, I would say, 5 or 6 years, things started to calm down quite a bit. And we really kind of got into a groove until now. Um, what, 2, 3 years ago, things started to really kind of become more. I think Charleston, when we were in Charleston, remember when we got in that really big tiff?
Mhm.
And I think that was, what, 3 years ago?
I think so.
Maybe 4. And I think that was probably right around the time things were starting to, because we hadn't argued like that in a long time. And I wasn't understanding it. I didn't, and I'm not saying it was just me either, but
No, it was all you. What are you talking
but if I think that, um, it certainly was harder for me to maybe hold back from getting really upset, and not, instead of taking a step back and thinking about it, or trying to come back when we weren't both pissed. I think it just escalated because I didn't have that filter, or that, I don't know, something was different in the way that I was being able to respond to some of these things, disagreements that we were having, and they just got in crazy, blown out of proportion. So yeah, that's kind of the background of where we started figuring this out. But we really didn't see it until after I had lost the weight and I started doing the research on hormones, and realizing that I was probably dealing with menopause or perimenopause. And that's when we were able to I was able to put those pieces together. And then as we talked about it, it was like, oh, hey,
about? Yep.
that makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with this. We're going to have a monthly chat, and we're going to talk a little bit more about specific things that happen, kind of as they arise. Um, so long as we're not still charged about them or upset about them, we're going to try to not bring any
No
fights.
drama.
We're not very dramatic people in the grand scheme of things, I think, except for with the hormones kind of get into,
Oh, I don't
into the
know.
thing.
Had we had videotape earlier on, or the ability to record some of our disagreements, as you call them.
Right. Oh, you mean when we were first married?
Oh, yeah. Anytime
Oh,
over the last 20 years. I mean, there have been some doozies for sure.
well, I think that's
They
fairly
were
normal.
pretty dramatic. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
regardless.
So we're going to bring these once a month, and hopefully we'll have something relevant. If you have a question or some concern that you've been dealing with, maybe we can talk about it too, because we have been around the block a few times. So maybe we might have had a way to deal with it and address it and go from there. So, guys, have a great week. Great. Yeah, and I'll talk to you next week.